come on in, sit back and relax. You're listening to episode 283 of WealthTech Today podcast. I'm your host, Craig Iskowitz, founder of Ezra Group Consulting. This podcast features news, analysis, and information all about the trends and best practices of wealth management technology. Now, this is a special episode of the WealthTech Today podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about marketing, specifically marketing strategies and content we've been developing here at Ezra Group. I'm joined on this episode by our fractional CMO, Marcus Grimm. But before we get into that, I want to talk about a couple of things that we're discussing on this podcast, which is a new buyer's guide that we've created here at Ezra Group, but we're launching. Will be available on our website for free. It's 26 questions that RIAs should ask when hiring a wealth tech consultant. Now, Marcus happens to be an expert on building buyer's guides in different industries. We talked in this episode about why you need a buyer's guide, some of the core elements that make an effective buyer's guide, and some of the key questions that RIAs should consider when evaluating a wealth tech consultant. One of the things we do when we work with a new RIA is check out their tech stack. And we have seen literally hundreds of tech stacks of RIAs. And let me tell you, most of them are loaded down with tech debt. So let's face it, tech debt can act like an anchor, holding down your RIA's efficiency and ability to scale. Now, if you want to free your firm for exponential growth, you need to run, not walk to our website, EzraGroup.com, and click on the golden Contact Us button on the homepage. The experienced team at Ezra Group can evaluate your current tech ecosystem, deliver targeted recommendations, optimize your existing systems and operations, even run an RFP and help you implement new software to get your firm to the next level. Ezra Group just makes tech stacks better. You can take advantage of our free consultation by going to EzraGroup.com. And now a couple of standard housekeeping chores. Please subscribe to this show wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. Check out our sponsor, the Invest in Others Charitable Foundation at investinothers.org. And if you are a wealth tech vendor, supplier of software, go check out our vendor portal at EzraGroup.com/register, where you can sign up to access our portal and update your integration data for your product to ensure that your Ezra Group Wealth Tech integration score is always accurate. All right, now let's kick this thing off. All right. I'm excited to introduce, this is a special episode of the WealthTech Today podcast. And we're going to be talking about marketing, and specifically we're talking about some marketing that we are doing. So this is a bit of a meta interview, and I'm going to introduce our guest, who is Marcus Grimm. Marcus, welcome to the program.
Craig, I am thrilled to be here. 260 some episodes, 280, wherever we are. I'm thrilled to be on the list.
I'm happy you're here, and Marcus is here. Not only is he an expert in marketing, Marcus is a fractional CMO. Who has worked in B2B marketing for over 2 decades. I'm reading your bio now, Marcus. And he approaches all projects with a content-first approach, and he is our fractional CMO. And we thought this would be a great interview. And now you spend your time between Florida and Pennsylvania. Where are you today?
Florida. In Florida right now, where the weather is beautiful.
And I'm in Florida as well, where the weather is beautiful.
Wonderful. Yes, and you've got a few team members in Florida. So
Ezra Group is all over. We've never had an office. We've always been remote, and we do have team members in Florida. And we have a lot of clients in Florida. So I was at a conference this week in Miami Beach, and I just drove up to Delray to visit some relatives, and now I'm in Sebring. I have a 97-year-old aunt who lives in Sebring, Florida, which is basically the middle of nowhere.
Yes. I know.
That's right. So I'm here. So what we're talking about is marketing, and we're going to talk about some things some materials you've helped us create, and they are guides on how to hire a wealth management consultant, which we are. And we thought, well, we get these questions all the time. Why should you hire a wealth management consultant? What are some of the things you need to do before you hire a wealth management consultant? How do you know? So we thought, let's take all that information and codify it into these guides. So what I want to talk about is we've helped other companies like ours as a fractional CMO to write these kind of buyer's guides. So why did we feel, you can just go through our conversation, why specifically for RIAs that they need this guide for hiring wealth management consultants?
Right. Yeah. So let's break it down and why what industries these guides make sense, and then we'll make it more specific to the RIA audience. And this was kind of a big aha that I had. Like a lot of marketers, I spent several years in sales, and we whenever you do what I call lost account analysis. So you go through a deal, you're like, we were going to win this one, and you lose the deal. And sometimes we look and we say, well, okay, they weren't happy with our rate, or they weren't happy with this, or they weren't happy with that. And there's a lot of reasons we all lose business. But one of the things that really just dawned on me several years ago are those deals where you lose them and you go, they made the wrong choice for them. It was a buyer who, through no fault of their own, they met with 2, 3, or 10 vendors. But at the end, you go, how did they make that choice? It was the wrong choice for them. And so when I really started digging into it more, what I realized was when we talk about learning, you talk to any teacher, they're going to tell you learning happens through repetition and feedback. But in the B2B world, we don't buy these complex services very, very often. If you're an RIA and you're looking for a fractional CTO, you probably haven't done that before. Maybe you've done it once or twice. And so what happens is you're really kind of setting yourself up for failure because you haven't gone through that repetition process. And so I started getting very serious about creating these guides a few years ago, realizing that if you are selling something complex, you kind of have a responsibility to educate your buyer on how they should actually buy it in the first place. And so creating these, it works quite frankly in any B2B industry where there's complex sales, but selling what you do, wealth management consulting, is certainly one of those. So it's definitely ideal for this space.
And what we find, when we are hired by RIAs, one of the first things we do is help them find new technology. So we're helping them pick vendors, evaluate their current vendors, evaluate their current tech stacks, but there's no one helping them evaluate the consultants.
That's exactly right. And so what you do is you're basically saying, hey, listen, you've probably never bought a CRM before. So you lean on our expertise because we've bought hundreds of them. And now what we're doing is
they've all bought at least one CRM before, but they haven't bought many CRMs. Right. Like we've evaluated so many and helped hundreds of firms pick software. Like we do this all the time, where you may have picked your current tech stack, but how often do you change and how often do you do this evaluation process, and do you have a methodology for it?
Exactly right. So you've seen that firsthand, where oftentimes you'll get under the hood and they'll go, wow, given what they're trying to do here, they made the wrong decision. And so we can come up with hypotheses of how they made the wrong decision. But my hypothesis is they made the wrong decision because they haven't done it before. They haven't gone through the repetition and feedback.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's key. And that's something we do quite a lot of. So let's talk about this buyer guide. So we talked about why RIAs need a buyer's guide. And so obviously we're very familiar with RIAs and why a structured guide like this is crucial for this audience. So we talk about why it matters. So what we mentioned that. So we talked about the decision making around it, and that we feel that having this document will help them make a decision.
Well, I think that's a huge point. It's first of all, if you haven't gone through this before, but the second thing that you usually see in a formal buying process is if you look at certain organizations, certain enterprise organizations, they tend to be a little bit better about being regimented in, okay, so what does vendor evaluation look like? What does vendor solution, what does vendor selection look like? But the reality is, when you get into smaller businesses or even mid-sized businesses, we tend to be a lot less structured about it, right? So one firm, you might say, oh, let's bring in the CEO of Craig will go on sales calls. Well, maybe another firm's just going to send in a sales development rep. So you're getting a totally different perspective. And then, of course, what happens is each of those providers, they offer their service in a different way. So now you're comparing apples and oranges. And then the final thing, which is always part of the sales process, but we need to plan for, are the emotional connections. But what happens to somebody that you speak with that, hey, we hit it off really, really well, But then when you look under the hood of the proposal, you're like, oh, well, maybe it's a really nice guy. Maybe I want to go play golf with him, but it doesn't mean they're the best solution for our firm. So it's not just bringing, we're trying to get you educated on the process, but we're also trying to put a structure in place so that you can feel good that you've made the best overall decision for your firm.
Indeed. So let's move on. We talk about why we did this. So let's talk about the core elements of an effective buyer's guide. So if you can go through what are those components and why are those needed for an effective buyer's guide?
Yeah. So the first thing that I think about is, and in the case of Ezra, which is what I do for many of my clients, is I'll actually produce two pieces of content. The first is essential questions you should ask before you actually go into the buying process. And then we'll have the ultimate guide to how do I hire a wealth management consultant. Now, the first piece, the precursor piece, is really important. It's the essential questions you should answer before you hire a wealth tech consultant. One of the things that I, there's people out there that are known for being renowned consensus builders. I like to think of myself as a context builder. I want to give you solutions that are appropriate for your organization. And the best way to get everyone in your organization on the same page and develop that context is through those questions. So questions that we really should be asking ourselves, where we're really understanding how who we are is going to impact that relationship, if you will. So it's going to be real simple things, right? You're going to be looking at your staff. If you have some good technical resources on your team, that means you can hire a different kind of wealth management consultant than somebody who has nobody on their team. Certainly, the way you go to market is also going to dictate how you would approach your selection process. And simple things like, is your organization used to working with people on retainer, or do you want fixed project? But the point in all this is, before you choose a wealth management consultant, you need to kind of look in the mirror and say, well, what do we know about ourselves so that we can frame those questions in a way that will make that process that we go through not just systematic, but appropriate for us.
Yeah, you said an important word, systematic. And that's what a lot of companies don't have, especially RIAs. They have systematic approaches for their business and how they do financial planning, how they do investment management, but they don't have a systematic approach for how to select a wealth tech consultant.
Many of us don't, and yes, it's true in B2B, but I see it everywhere. Craig and I, you and I are of similar age, right? And so I'm noticing right now, my son-in-law is going through the process of evaluating a car. Well, in my life, I've bought too many cars, and I know the mistakes I've made, and through no fault of his own, he's bought one. So his perspective is just very, very different. So I think, that's the idea here, is understanding, so what I've been helping him to do is figure out, well, what are the essential questions you need to ask yourself before you go onto a car lot? How many years are you looking to make payments? What are the essential features? Before you go shop, you need to know yourself really well.
Exactly. And that leads me to my next question. Or the next part of this interview, which is we're going through the document a bit and just talking about some of the sections. And this document is available for free on our website. And there'll be a link in the show notes for any RIAs listening who want to get access to this ultimate guide or the 26 questions to answer when hiring a wealth tech consultant.
Can we spend a moment on that? 26.
Yes.
And what's funny about this is that number is different for every one of my clients. 26 is not a small number, Craig, but that's what you helped feed us. It's a complex business. 26 questions is a lot of freaking questions to ask yourself.
We actually had over 100 questions. You just cut them down to 26. And I said, this is a marketing tactic, right? I said, why not make it 25? And you said,
well, what I said is that the right number is the right number. And so I think we got to the point that we said, you know what? You really want to make a good decision? Ask yourself these 26 questions.
Yeah, well, I thought you said that you wanted a number. This is just in terms of marketing and using numbers in marketing.
Oh, yes.
That using the number 26 is an unusual number. 25 is a common number as a multiple of 5. So 5, 10, 15, 20, those are common numbers you see more often. You don't
Yes.
see the number 26 very
Yeah,
often.
it's a little bit of a marketing trick. It's showing specificity in your work. And as I like to think of myself, I think you and I were co-authors on this. Is look, if the number's 26, the number's 26. That's
Indeed. So section 1, understanding your strategic goals. As you just mentioned, the question you're asking your son-in-law about buying a car, most people don't ask themselves before they buy a car. They just walk in or look at the color or the style or the kind of car they want. They don't think about those other aspects. So these are strategic goals that we have our clients answer when we come in. So if you can answer them beforehand, it helps. What's your growth objectives for the next 3 to 5 years? Is technology helping? So a lot of firms have growth objectives. Many firms do, almost everyone. But is technology helping to differentiate our services, or is it just getting us by? That's a question a lot of firms don't really think about too much.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a great point. You can look at technology and some people will look at it as just an operational cost. So if it's an operational cost, well, what's the goal? Do it as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. But we are blessed to be living a fascinating era where if you want to use this technology to really drive firm differentiation, you can. But that's going to lead to other cascading decisions. So therefore, we need to ask that question at the beginning. How are you thinking about technology? How are you thinking about your strategic plan?
The other question I would add to this is, are we investment management focused or are we financial planning focused? And that's a very common differentiator for many RIAs. Some do both, but they often will lean more heavily in one versus the other when they're pitching to prospective clients. Their pitch mainly revolves around their investment management success, and they also do financial planning. They say we're pitching on our financial planning expertise and capabilities, and we also do investment management.
Yeah, so that's a great example, Craig. And again, whenever I write these things, my clients always know more about their industry. But answer that one for me. Depending on the answer, how would that reflect how I'll inevitably end up thinking about options like the Ezra Group? And maybe it's, hey, Ezra Group can do both of these, but what types of firms would be elevated or de-elevated or moved into the mix or moved out of the mix, depending on how you answer that question?
Yeah, first we do both. But it would help if when you're looking at other firms that don't have that experience that we have, working with both types of firms and working with both types of technology, that we are experts in all aspects of wealth management technology, whether it's investor management tools. We have a lot of RIA clients that have asset management divisions. So we have extensive experience working with the asset management tools, which are different than the wealth management tools. That's another thing. And understanding how they integrate. Most wealth tech consultants don't have that expertise. So if you do both, you'd want a firm like Ezra Group versus some other firm.
That makes a ton of sense.
Okay, so we're down to a couple more minutes. So we want to wrap this up on a high note. So looking at the other sections, do you want to talk about any other sections that you think would resonate? Maybe identifying resource constraints or preparing for long-term success?
One of the things that's in the Ultimate Buyer's Guide that I absolutely love is the idea of a formal rubric. I mean, if you look how enterprise organizations buy things, they will come up with a rubric and they'll say, okay, based on how we've answered those questions, these are the 10 essential things. And then we want everybody on our buying committee to evaluate all the vendors based on these things. And we give you a sample rubric in there, but what's really key is that you create a rubric that's appropriate for your organization and what you're trying to do. And then you let your team vote on it. And sometimes it's like, hey, we all said this vendor was 10 out of 10. Some people will say that guy's a 5, that guy's a 10. Well, let's talk about it, because we want, whenever we do this stuff too, we also want to have team alignment, right? You don't want to bring in a consultant that half the people said Ezra Group's perfect and half the group said they're not perfect. So the rubric which we put in there, and it doesn't have to be as complex as the one we put in there, but trying to objectively evaluate the options, I think just helps you more holistically approach things in a more strategic manner.
Talking about section 3, assessing client needs and expectations. What do our clients value most about our services? Are we meeting client expectations for technology? How do we handle client segmentation? These are all really important questions.
Yeah, yeah. When you talk about those questions, so like segmentations is a great one, right? There's going to be some real repercussions in terms of if you are really, if you've established as an RIA, if you've established, look, these are the four personas that we market to. Well, then you're going to want to have different segmentation strategies for them. I think the modern firms are getting away from let's send the same newsletter to everybody. If we can establish four specific personas, let's send four different newsletters. And of course, with AI, the answer might look like 400 different newsletters. But the point is how you're thinking about your market will directly impact the sophistication of a consultant that you bring on board.
I go to a lot of conferences. I think we're going to 14 this year. And a very common session is about personalization. So it's helping advisors personalize their messages, personalize their investment strategies to their clients. And I hear this all the time. Don't just send the same newsletter out to everybody. They're gonna ditch it. You want personalized. So AI can help with that. So that's another area that we incorporated tremendously into our capabilities is how do we bring AI into the RIA's ecosystem?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Is the technology is there, but again, it's that looking in the mirror piece. So what I often say to my clients is, okay, the technology's there. Have you as a firm agreed upon these are the 2 to 5 personas we are going to market to? So, okay, that's great. We've agreed on it. Now let's bring in the technology. Do we have the right technology that can appropriately segment into those 2 to 5 personas? And then we move on to how will the messaging be different? Is the messaging the same, but the cadence is different? Is the messaging and cadence different? And so that's, again, where today you can do so much with technology, but the first thing you want to be doing is asking around the office and saying, okay, do we know our personas? How do we want to go to market? How do we treat these people differently based on that persona?
And it also helps us when one of the most common platforms we work on at an RIA is the CRM. It's the top three: CRM, portfolio management, trading rebalancing, reporting, compliance. Those are the top areas we usually get called in for billing when we're working with an RIA. So CRM is very important. We do a lot of CRM conversions, probably over a dozen a year, converting from one to another. But most of the time we're spending is helping the RIAs use their CRM better. And client segmentation is a huge issue. Either firms don't segment at all, which is a problem. They're wasting time and effort, or they segment but don't standardize, and it's not consistent across the company.
Correct. Absolutely. And those things, as you know, are all technically achievable. These are we're not talking about inventing things that don't exist, but it's those hard questions at the beginning, right? Helping to wrestle them down and wrestle them to the mat and say, what does segmentation look like, and would it be meaningful, right? Like, I mean, if you come up with 2 different segments, but at the end of the day, you're not going to do anything different with them. It's sort of an exercise in vain. And so, I think that's some questions that firms really do want to ask themselves before they meet with a consultant like yourself, because
it helps.
Yeah, and I think you've seen this too, right? There are plenty of technology providers out there that will implement whatever the client wants. But does that mean that that's the way to get the best result for the client? Because I think ideally what you want is a wealth tech consultant who can help you say, okay, well, you've talked about segmentation, but I'm not hearing that we've got clearly defined segments. We can help you do that and then operationalize that as well.
Yeah, it's something we spend a lot of time doing, working with RIA clients to understand, for them to help understand what their segments are, why they're segmenting that way, and what the service level should be, and how do we codify that in the CRM so it's managed and the process going forward is easy to handle.
Yes.
All right, so let's move on to the next section before we go. So it's clarifying your technology vision. So this is something we think is very helpful when selecting a WealthTech consultant and as firms that we work with. So how important, do you see technology as a cost center or a growth enabler? Super important. That's a mindset. Is our tech stack advanced enough to help in recruiting advisors from other firms? Where we get that all the time. And a lot of firms, so we work with a lot of RIA aggregators. So they're buying up RIAs or firms that want to be in the aggregation or just want to do some acquisitions. And they want their tech stack to be attractive to other advisors. So that's an important decision. You want to pick up from like Ezra, because we've done that so many times. We can help you build a tech stack that is attractive to advisors from other firms.
It's so funny. You made me think of a conversation I frequently have with my financial advisor, and every time we get on a screen share, he literally apologizes for the dashboard that I'm seeing with my retirement in it, because like the right technology just makes the advisor look sharper. I will tell you, I trust this guy. I trust my money. The technology does not help me feel that way. I trust him despite the technology, and that's tough for that advisor, right? Because he's already now playing with one hand tied behind his back.
That is true. All right. So if we were to wrap this up, what are the top things that we think RIAs will get out of this buyer's guide?
I think first and foremost is understanding that you need to know who you are before you go shopping. You really need to get a clear vision of what you are trying to look for. The second thing is based on what you're trying to look for. Now you kind of know. That's where we go to that rubric that I was talking about. So that's how we in fact say, okay, based on the things that we know about ourselves, here are the things that are absolutely essential for us to find in a wealth management consultant. And then the final piece of that is once we know what those things are, make sure that we're actually evaluating them in a spreadsheet type of way. I mean, the way I would always recommend somebody do it is, okay, these days, a lot of these calls are going to happen on a Zoom call. So maybe you've got 4 members of your team on with the consultant, so you're telling the team, hey, by the way, we are going to evaluate you on these 4. We're going to evaluate each consultant on these 4 things. So let's make sure we put in a score. We're going to sync up with it at the end. The final bonus thing that I would add for you is there's nothing wrong. I'm a big believer in transparency in the sales process. So once your team comes up with this rubric, I would encourage you, share it with the vendors, just so you guys know, this is the scoreboard we're working off of. Like this is what we've decided matters, and this is what we're going to ask you about. I'm just a huge believer in that, because the best vendors will now come into that call and they'll show you exactly how they respond to those questions, because you're the one who's developed those questions.
That is true. I think we are out of time for this overview. Marcus, thanks for being here and helping us, helping me to talk about this buyer's guide, which will be available on our website. It'll be on the homepage. There'll be a link available at EzraGroup.com. Thanks again, Marcus.
Hey, Craig, thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Hey, it's Craig again. Here are my top 3 takeaways from this episode. Well, you need a buyer's guide. You're an RIA. You need to download our 26 questions when evaluating wealth tech consultants. It's really important to have it. It's going to help you go through the core elements. It's going to look through the questions you need to ask one by one, help you understand how to evaluate consultants. It's not easy to do. I know we work with a lot of RIAs, and they've usually have worked with 1 or 2 consultants before we get there, and they made some mistakes before they found us, fortunately. But you really need to check it out. It'll be available on our website at EzraGroup.com, so please download it. And that's the end of this episode of the WealthTech Today podcast. Thanks for listening. But before I go, please go to our website, EzraGroup.com, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage and sign up for our newsletter. Once a month, you'll receive an email chock full of wealth management goodness, news, information, and updates. You will not be disappointed. Thanks again for listening, and talk to you all again next time.